Welcome to Real Life in Real Estate. I'm your host, Nikki Robbs. I'm a real estate agent serving the Puyallup and Tacoma area and pretty much anywhere South Sound. And honestly, if you call me and ask me for a favor, I might come to your area too. On today's podcast, we have Herb Daniels with Housemaster. He is a home inspector. He and his wife, Sarah, started this business just a little bit ago so that they could stay close to home, but also serve and educate, which is their passion. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Herb because we do talk about benefits for both buyers and sellers. Stay tuned to find out how a home inspector might be benefiting you as a buyer, as a seller, as a homeowner, maybe as someone who's not even interested in selling anytime soon. There's lots of benefits to having your home inspected from now and then, so please stay tuned to listen to Herb as he talks about the benefits of having a home inspection. Hi, Herb. Thanks for coming and being on my podcast. It's so exciting to have you here today.
Thank you, Nikki.
I love having home inspectors on because I think it's important that people meet you before they need you. And so I wanted to give people a chance to hear your voice and hear your concerns and hear your heart for how you serve your clients. That way, when they call you, they'll be like, okay, I know sort of what you do, and I know sort of what you offer, and now I just want to hire you.
I love that.
Right?
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to share my voice.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into home inspecting, and why that is a passion of yours now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started out in the Army, and I did that actually for 28 years. That was a long time to be working for somebody all the time. And after retirement, my wife and I decided we wanted something we could do together and would also keep us local because, as you can guess, I traveled a lot in the military. So when we looked through lots of different options, we realized we wanted to own our own home business, and we wanted one that kept us in the community, which was a really important value to us. And home inspections just seemed natural. It felt like it fit. Because it gave me an opportunity to work with people still, to move around, be outside and inside, of course. And yeah, offer people information that can be valuable and also needed at the same time.
Yeah.
And that really gave me a sense of purpose when we selected home inspections.
Have you had any personal experiences of why home inspections was super important to you, or was just this is a great way to bring education and support to a lot of people?
Well, the big picture is yes, bringing that education and support is very important. People, even homeowners, they just don't look into their attics and crawl spaces.
So true.
Yeah, so if you're a home buyer and you've never seen this house before, or maybe only walked through it one time, it's really not a good opportunity to determine the condition of the house. And I can go through there in just a little bit more time, and I can really give them a good picture of the condition of the home. And it's even more fun when they come along with me for the inspection, because then I can show them even more. And sometimes, demonstrating or showing them captures a lot more than putting it into a report. And I like that piece as well.
I love that all inspectors give such a detailed report. I love that all of you don't bring this house is falling down perspective. And so how do you word your reports, or is it your interactions in person with the clients? Which part do you think makes them feel more at ease?
Definitely the interaction. The reports can be technical. There's a lot of information. There can be a lot of pictures. And I believe it can feel a little overwhelming if it's the first time you've looked at a home inspection report. So when I have an opportunity to interact with the home buyer or the pre-lister, whoever the person is, then it gives me an opportunity to answer the questions that are most important to them, to look at the components of the house that really matter to that individual. In just a few minutes of conversation, getting to know a little bit about them, understand what they're looking for in buying the home, I can really focus my attention on their needs.
That's awesome. What areas do you like to serve? You said you like to stay close to home, so how close to home is that?
Well, I guess it can be relative since I'm so used to traveling around the world.
Right.
For example, I'm heading up to West Seattle tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid of a little commute. I'll go to West Seattle. I've been up, or out, I should say, to Hoquiam, down to Olympia, and then I've served all of Pierce County. So really, Thurston, Pierce, South King County, those are very comfortable for me
That's
serve.
awesome.
Yeah.
So Clay Ellen probably isn't too far.
No,
So, all of Western Washington probably pretty good.
it's easy.
Pretty good.
Yes, it's easy. I don't mind it. It's that time I get to spend doing a little professional development. I might listen to a podcast on the way
Right.
about home inspections or learning a little something about the market.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good opportunity for me as well, just to enjoy the travel.
Yeah. What kind of podcast is your favorite? Is it mostly home inspection? Do you mix some stuff in there?
I'm all over the place.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I have a bad habit. When my wife, Sarah, says, you got to listen to this podcast, I might listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I almost always do. I'll check them out. I do my best to not be podcast flipping while I'm driving. Sometimes it might just be a good, podcast to allow me to sink into the moment and just prepare for the inspection. I have as a personal hobby, I love to meditate, and so sometimes just listening to those calm, peaceful words, and they get me through the traffic,
Right.
and also show up in a great state of mind
Yes.
to do the home inspection.
Oh, that's so important, because when you show up to something that is potentially stressful and you've already
Yes.
brought stress with you, it's
Oh,
pretty
so
difficult. Yeah. What are some of the services you offer that people might not think that would be part of a home inspection?
Well, I find it interesting that they will always ask, do you go in the attic or do you go in the crawl space? And of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think all home inspectors do. If we can fit in, then we get in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to try and get as far in as we can. So looking at the whole house matters very much. Some of the additional services, a lot of times we don't think about things like a sewer scope, for example, as an ancillary service. And a lot of the established homes around our South Sound communities have been here for a little while. And really, if you know the age of your sewer line or if you know the age of the home,
Mm-hmm.
it's important when they hit that threshold of their lifespan to get them inspected, and then do so routinely through a regular maintenance inspection every few years.
So in the Tacoma area, around the lifespan we're talking about is what, maybe 40 years?
You hit it right on the head.
Okay, so
40 years is
anything
great.
1982 and before,
Yes.
you really, really need to. It's not just an idea. You should get a sewer scope. You should get a sewer scope.
You absolutely should. And I sometimes back off a little on the pressure for the ancillary services. I don't like to feel like a salesman or anything, but I will generally ask the individual if they know the condition of the sewer line, if they've had it checked out before, and if the answers are no, then I just explain to them the value of getting a sewer scope completed, especially if they're a home buyer, because that's one of the surprises you don't want to have.
No. Yeah. It's very expensive to find out later when we can
Yes.
afford to find out before.
Yes.
There's a huge difference in, oh no, there's water. Where's the water coming from? And then we have to have all kinds of different people come out to find out where the water's coming from. Where if we just invest a little bit ahead of time, like, oh, that's a future problem. That's where it is. Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's your favorite piece of the inspection, or your favorite part of the house? Like, oh, this tends to go well, or it tends to go pretty, problems are obvious.
My favorite part of the house actually is getting into the attics and the crawl spaces.
Really?
It is. It may sound a little silly, but those are the spaces people just don't go into very often. And whether it's the home seller or the home buyer, they're not aware of the conditions up there because we don't see them regularly. We know a plug that acts a little funny and doesn't always have power, or a furnace that is aged and it makes a little bit more noise. But the problems that we find in an attic or a crawl space can be hidden for years, and then they just become worse and worse and worse until they suddenly reveal themselves, and they can be quite dramatic.
Yeah.
I really value being able to find those problems and explain what could potentially happen if they're not addressed in a particular time frame.
Yeah. Awesome. What's some questions that you think homeowners should ask?
That's a really good question too. I wrote a couple of them down, and so I'm going to refer to my notes real quick. It's one of the things that I wonder if they want to ask and don't, but how can this be fixed or repaired?
Yes.
They look at it and they understand that it's a problem, but they might not understand why it's a problem or the magnitude of a problem. And having a home inspector there and available to them, this is the perfect opportunity to fully understand what they may be assuming if they do make that purchase. So it's fun then to tell them what their options are. And this I usually do with the full cooperation of the real estate agent, because I don't want to be giving advice or anything that may be contrary to conversations they've already had with the real estate agent.
Interesting.
So I'm typically a little conservative on that until I really understand the agent, the real estate professional, what their boundaries are, because sometimes they want to be that person that advises them as well.
I feel like most of my job is telling people it's not that bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And then some of your job is saying, well, sometimes it is that bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it sounds terrible, but
Absolutely.
This is foundation issues can look really scary, or just saying foundation issues, saying the word crack can scare a lot of people. And as you have shown us pictures for our homebuyer classes, like, well, that's a crack that's not a problem. That's a crack that is a problem.
Right.
And so bringing education and being able to say, no, that this is okay. I know I said crack in the foundation. I didn't mean the house is falling apart. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so important in the communication and the report writing as well. The last thing I want to do is scare them away from the report.
Yeah.
And so I'm very mindful of what I say to them and then what I put in the report as well, just so that it puts them at ease if it's really something that is manageable.
Yeah. Okay, so now off the top of my head, I can't remember what I asked you ahead of time. So,
That's all right.
Was there any other questions that I said, hey, we're going to talk about this today? And you're like, yes, that's a great topic.
There was one you asked, is there anything you don't do?
Yes, what is it that you don't do?
So that is such that is a very funny question, because I had just mentioned it in the new homebuyers class. That I don't do pools and spas.
Yes.
You would not believe it, but the very next day, the house I inspected had a pool and spa.
You're kidding.
The first that I have inspected in the last year.
Wow.
I felt a little disappointed that I couldn't do a thorough inspection of the pump house and all of that, because it was quite dated. It was a 40-year-old pump, and I would have been way outclassed in that inspection. But now I wonder, geez, should I go after my pool and spa certification? Because it just happened. I've seen my first one. It just
happened. Oh, man.
Yeah.
So what kind of roadblocks for you is like, well, I can do the whole house and all around the house, and then the boundary line is here if there's a pool or a jacuzzi or something. What does that mean for the homeowner? Get a second inspection, or get a pool specialist, or just like, well, it's a pool?
Right. So it's, in that case, because it was a very old pump house and the equipment was dated, I recommended they get a pool specialist.
Yeah.
I think another inspector would have looked at that and probably done just about what I did. It wasn't leaking, the electrical was safe, the equipment was sound, it was insulated, things like that. So I could give a good overview, and I think any inspector really could. It's just a big plumbing system.
Yeah.
But they needed a close-in look.
Awesome.
By a pool specialist, and that was my advice to them. They need someone who's better trained and spent more time on that piece of equipment.
And people who have put in-ground pools in this area, like, okay, well, our ground does fluctuate a lot.
Yes.
Not as much as maybe the eastern side of the state, where it's both drier and colder, but it's still something that has to be maintained, and it's not maintained by just anybody. So I can imagine, yes, not every home inspector was going to want to do a pool.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Sure, and this one was a little bit of a challenge because the pool was full.
Even better.
Yes, there were the obvious signs, though. As you just mentioned, our ground fluctuates, and the entire patio around the pool was so cracked and heaved and settling. So I didn't want to be the person to deliver the bad news, but you got to tell them.
Someone's got to say it.
These cracks are bad. Eventually, they're going to make their way into the pool, and you've got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Are there any questions that you think home buyers should ask but they don't?
Let's see. I have another one of those that I wrote down. Yes. So a question I think they should always ask, if I point out a deficiency, they should ask, well, how bad is it? Will it get worse?
Yeah.
Because that's really the question. And that's what I try to express in my report. If I'm not able to have that one-to-one conversation, if you don't fix it, this is what could happen.
Yeah.
You can't really predict the future, but some things are very apparent. If you've got rotted trim or fascia around the house, it's only going to get worse. And eventually that rot can move into the framing. It can move into the sheathing of the roof or the siding. And so it's good to let them know, if you don't fix this problem and it gets into your house, then it becomes a much worse problem. And the bill for that could be much, much higher.
Wow. Yeah. That's you probably have to have that conversation though every step of the inspection, because you're an inspector that likes to have the home buyers with you.
Yes.
So then as you're going along, like, okay, well, look at that. And you get that education moment. Okay, look at this. I found this. And then the question needs to be, well, how bad is that?
Right.
All the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's okay. Some ask a lot of questions. Some really appreciate it if I just narrate what I'm doing, which honestly, it's a great check on learning for me.
Okay.
I mean, it allows me to show my skills, give them confidence in what I'm doing, but at the same time, it reminds me what I'm doing and how important it is.
Okay.
And so it really keeps me on task, and I really value that and appreciate that, to know that I'm being observed, watched to do my inspection. It may feel like a little pressure, but I'm far over it now.
What about when home buyers can't be there when you're doing the inspection, and all you've got is the agent who let you in, and they're sitting in the car or something, and we're not too worried about the house. You're
Yes.
going to find out everything about the house. How does that impact your work, or how does that impact the report? What do you think?
Right. Well, I never let an agent get away without briefing them first.
Thank you.
So it's very important to me, more so if I discover something that could be a deal breaker. I want them to be aware of that. I don't want it to be a surprise, because they may have questions for me about how big of a deal breaker it could be. And
Right.
and only they, again, understand the values of the buyer. They know what they're willing to spend in repairs or maintenance, things like that. I don't know that. And so I've got to be able to share the information with them. So I'll make sure they get an out briefing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ever been an issue. I think every real estate agent has really preferred that.
Oh, yeah, because we need to get ready to negotiate, and
Yes.
you're giving us a little bit more information, like, oh, okay, now we're going to ask for closing costs, or now we're going to ask for repairs, now we're going to see how scared we are,
Yes.
or how scared we're not.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I write that report for them, whether the buyer is there or not, they're still going to get the same comprehensive detail in their report.
Okay.
I'm not going to write any less in there just because I had an opportunity to share it with them in person.
That's important.
I want them to have it written down, so if they have to go back and refer to it, or if they need to show it, just as proof of, here's the problem and this is what I'd like to get fixed.
Or to call up a specialist and say, well,
Yeah.
here's the verbiage, because often you guys have technical verbiage that I would not use, or your average buyer and seller wouldn't use. Be like, well, that's a problem. That's the extent of my language. And then you have the very technical, it's this problem exactly. Like, I'm just going to cut and paste that paragraph, send it to the specialist, and they'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm very aware of that, and I try not to be technical in my reports. If I have to write the specific name, I put it in and then I define it. So it's not... I'm not trying to impress them. I have a license number, so that should be good enough to demonstrate my expertise.
Yeah.
I would much rather the report be written in a way that is easily understandable and clear at the time that it's read.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that. What about for sellers? We're in a competitive market. I like to offer the services of a home inspector to sellers that we inspect before listing. What are some of the pros and cons you see of that?
I don't know if I can think of a con.
I know, right?
Of doing a pre-listing inspection. Yeah, that's funny. I think I do about half and half, pre-listing and home buyer inspections. The value of a pre-listing inspection really then takes away any surprises for the seller. They often don't go into their, like I said, their attics and crawl spaces. They may not really be aware of the condition of their electricity, the electrical throughout the house. So it's a good opportunity for them to see really what's happening in their home, because sometimes we have a little bit of a prejudice. It's our home, it's our space. It's something that we've loved and cherished. And to have someone come in and say that it's broken, it can hurt a little bit. And I'm very sensitive of that, especially for a pre-listing. I try not to imply that it was due to neglect or anything like that. Oftentimes, it's just that we don't know how to properly care for the home, how to maintain it.
Yeah.
And coming in and giving them an unbiased look at the home really matters for pre-listing.
Yeah. I think so many times owners, life is big and life is complex, and sometimes the things with the house are like, oh, that's not really a problem because it's tolerable, or we found a workaround. And then getting that pre-listing inspection means, oh, just because it's tolerable to me doesn't mean it's tolerable to the next person. And having a disinterested third party, a neutral third party come in and say, well, it is a problem. You should consider fixing it. And then that gives a better conversation on my end of things, saying we should consider fixing it.
Yes, right.
The only con that I've run across is that then we have to disclose things if we're not willing to fix it.
Yes.
Hopefully, though, the inspection instigates, oh, we're going to fix things before we list it, and then we're all good.
Yes.
I like it when it goes that direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of anything else. Was there anything else that you'd like buyers and sellers to know about the value of home inspections, or you personally, what you and Sarah offer people?
There is one
Yay.
other thing.
Okay.
I think I would really like to encourage homeowners in particular, consider routine maintenance on your home. Sometimes it's easy. We get the furnace checked out once a year, and that's great. Do we get the plumbing checked out once a year? Or do we look at the roof once a year? Things like that. And I don't think you need a home inspection every year, but every few years, if you don't go in your attic, you should consider going in there or having someone go in. And likewise, the crawl space. Those are two areas where there are a lot of critical components of the house. Your electrical, your HVAC, your insulation. There's a lot that can go wrong in those spaces, and you want to be aware of the conditions. Oftentimes you can see something and you can predict what the lifespan will be, and you can give them a timeline so that they can budget for it, or you may actually discover something that isn't going to make the next season. So home maintenance inspections, there's a lot to them, and I think there's a lot really of value to them for the homeowner. And so I always encourage people, especially after I've done an inspection for a home buyer, to remind them, in 3 years now, consider doing this again. Have someone come out. And we don't need to look at the cosmetics. We don't have to tell them about dings in the wall or the floor or anything.
Right.
It's really the areas that matter most to them.
I think it's so common to be hanging your Christmas lights and discover, oh, the roof doesn't feel so great. But then it's Christmas season and it's really busy, and then you don't worry about it until the next Christmas, and you're hanging the lights and you find the roof doesn't feel so great. So as this podcast episode is going to come out sometime in spring or early summer, probably spring, this is your heads up. Don't wait till Christmas lights to remember that, oh, that piece felt slippery, that didn't look so great, or we were just up there doing moss management in this area. Like, now's that time to have someone come out and check out the roof, check out the attic space, and see if something is bigger than it appears to be.
Absolutely. And when you do a home maintenance inspection, the nice thing is you're not paying for an individual roofer or plumber or electrician to come out and dig into each one of those components. You're paying someone who's a generalist to give you an idea and can tell you confidently that you need a specialist to come look at this, or you're good to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for coming by, Herb.
Thank
This was
you.
really great. So everybody, this was Herb Daniels with Housemaster. He and Sarah are here local in Tacoma, and I'll put all of his contact information in the show notes. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening to Real Life in Real Estate with Nikki Robs. If you need any advice for buying, selling, or investing in real estate, please give me a call. You can reach me at my email address, nikki@theoryre.com, or at Nikki Robs Homes, just about everywhere. This podcast is available on every podcast platform. Please like, subscribe, and share Real Life in Real Estate with anyone that you think might be interested in buying, selling, investing, or just maintaining your home. Thank you for your help.